May 23, 1994, the president of the Cannes jury, Clint Eastwood, announces the winner.
Pulp Fiction.
An incredibly happy Quentin Tarantino, accompanied by A-list stars, rushes onto the stage and flips off an angry woman in the audience. In that moment, he becomes a true movie star. Neither the success of Reservoir Dogs, his first film, nor the later Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for Pulp Fiction would bring him closer to the status of a Hollywood demigod than this very moment. A self-taught video store clerk who spent years unsuccessfully trying to sell his scripts suddenly becomes one of the most famous people in the world. A role model for future filmmakers, his films began to be copied. His detached yet irresistibly gripping dialogues imitated. Society neither loves him or hates him. There's no middle ground. And despite the huge number of hits in his filmography, Pulp Fiction can be called the director's most important film. Through it, we can see a detailed portrait of this unusual filmmaker. Or rather, what he wants to show us while deceiving the viewer. Yes, all of us have been fooled. And we want more. After all, the word fiction is right there in the title. Let's take a look at Quentin Tarantino through the lens of Pulp Fiction and try to assemble a portrait of this unusual, or perhaps surprisingly grounded, director. Hi, this is ElevenSlate and Pulp Fiction Explained. The entire filmography of Quentin Tarantino is a massive love letter to his childhood passions. From an early age, Tarantino fell in love with movies and went to see them every weekend. The older he got, the more time he spent in movie theaters. His mother, Connie, didn't mind taking her child to any film, even ones filled with violence or sexual subtext. It was just a movie after all, and what happened on screen had nothing to do with real life. Back then, Tarantino dreamed of becoming an actor. Like many kids who didn't yet understand what a director actually does, they see people on screen and want to be there themselves. Only later did he realize that his true calling was directing, creating films, not just acting in them. Still, he could never fully abandon acting. Part of his nature was drawn to performance.
Oh yeah!
And so, after hundreds of films watched, Tarantino begins his determined path toward the Hollywood Olympus. He takes acting classes, goes to auditions, and dreams of making his own movie. His first attempt is the black and white My Best Friend's Birthday, an unfinished film that nevertheless taught Tarantino how not to make movies. After a chain of lucky coincidences, his first full-fledged screenplay, about the love between comic book clerk Clarence and call girl Alabama, titled True Romance, ends up in the hands of producers and goes into production. Next, studios buy Natural Born Killers, about the murderous couple Mickey and Mallory traveling across the states. And finally, Tarantino gets to direct a film himself, Reservoir Dogs, which becomes a true hit of independent cinema. The next film would be the subject of heightened attention from film lovers everywhere. A crucial stage in any director's career. No matter how strong the debut is, that success has to be proven again. And so, Tarantino decides to base his second film on one of his long-standing ideas. A film anthology made up of seemingly worn-out stories, tales audiences had seen hundreds of times before. Characters cross over between the segments, and the main character of one story can become a minor figure in the next. At first, Tarantino wanted to invite other directors to write and direct their own segments. He himself took on the story of gangster Vincent Vega, who was tasked by his boss with taking his wife Mia out for the evening. Tarantino's former video store co-worker, Roger Avery, wrote the story of boxer Butch Coolidge, who decides to defy a crime boss's orders. The third director was supposed to be Tony Scott, who had already worked with Tarantino's material. He directed True Romance from Tarantino's script. But after some time, Quentin abandoned the idea. In his mind, a complete and final version of the film had taken shape, one that he needed to direct himself, which naturally raises an important question. Why make a film built out of worn-out, lowbrow stories in the first place? And this is where Tarantino's first trick is hidden. Because despite the primitive setup, each story in the film represents a deliberate breaking of genre rules. Let's look at the segment with Vincent and Mia. At its core, it's a dangerous relationship between a crime boss's enforcer and his wife. We've seen this many times before, in Coppola's The Cotton Club, in Billy Bathgate with Nicole Kidman and Dustin Hoffman, or Kevin Costner falling for Madeline Stowe in Revenge, directed by the already mentioned Tony Scott. But instead of the obvious confrontation with a jealous husband, Vincent ends up reviving a would-be lover after a drug overdose.
If you're all right, say something.
Something.
Let's move on. A boxer is told to throw a fight, but he wins and goes on to run from gangsters. Think Stanley Kubrick's Killer Kiss, also about a boxer and the mob. Or why go that far if one of the episodes of the parody Police Squad with Leslie Nielsen openly mocked this very concept?
No entry.
Press.
Oh, okay.
But again, in Tarantino's version, the story leads to a fight with deviants using a katana. The third segment, about Vincent and Jules killing the guys who dared to cheat their boss, according to Tarantino himself, references action movies of the 1980s. For example, Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Films like these often begin with the appearance of cool, efficient killers stylishly taking out their targets. But Tarantino stops and asks, who are these people, really? Surely they don't exist solely to complete their mission. They watch movies, listen to music, enjoy good food. And after the bloody job is done, the film doesn't switch to a heroic figure gunning down villains in a shootout. No, these killers are cleaning blood out of a car and panicking over the imminent return of their associate's wife. And eventually, everything leads to a moment of religious awakening and redemption. Each story in Pulp Fiction deceives the viewer. The title of the film, the premise of every segment, all suggest that you're about to see something familiar. But gradually, the audience realizes that something is off. The characters talk a lot, listen to music, dance. The film slowly pulls you into its atmosphere and then delivers an unexpected, tense resolution to each storyline. Mischief managed. Hidden in this slow immersion is another key aspect of Tarantino's filmmaking. He makes what are known as hangout movies. The goal of such films isn't to shock with plot twists or overwhelm with drama, but to create a relaxed atmosphere you want to return to. It's like hanging out with friends, talking about random things, joking around, and enjoying the moment.
They call it Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese.
That's right.
Most of Tarantino's films follow this hangout format. Even in Nazi-occupied France, there's room to discuss the quality of local strudel and talk about old movies. The viewer is meant to enjoy spending time with charismatic characters, even if, objectively, they're complete scumbags. This is Tarantino's core intention, rooted directly in his childhood. Taste is heavily shaped by the era in which it forms. For Tarantino, frequent trips to the cinema began at the turn of the 1960s and 1970s, a crucial period in the evolution of Hollywood. The decline of the Golden Age, with its various heroes, lack of extreme violence, and obligatory musicals among Best Pictures nominees. The Hays Code, which had policed morality in cinema, gave way to morally ambiguous protagonists, violence, sex, and deeply unsettling themes. It's hard to find a period in film history more saturated with brutal cinema. This is where New Hollywood was born, and Quentin Tarantino absorbed it all, only to release those childhood emotions onto the screen decades later, captivating audiences in the process. And Pulp Fiction contains a lot of deeply personal elements for Tarantino himself. As the director has said more than once, only people who know me well truly understand how much of myself I put into my films. But considering how powerful Tarantino's public persona has become, so influential in global pop culture that it's been studied by countless people, we can now quite confidently reconstruct what exactly he meant, based on his interviews, biographies, and books he has written himself. Let's take the storyline of Butch, played by Bruce Willis. The catalyst for his entire journey is his father's watch. He willingly walks into danger to reclaim a small object that connects him to a father figure he never really knew. Much like Quentin Tarantino himself and his own father, who left the family before Quentin was born. In his book Cinema Speculation, Tarantino frequently talks about his mother's boyfriends, men who shaped his cinematic taste and whom he gravitated toward as surrogate father figures. These relationships, however, always ended in separation. Quentin even took the last name of one of his mother's husbands for a time, Zastapil, but after their breakup, he returned to the name we know today, Tarantino. Otherwise, I could be telling you about the films of Quentin Zastapil. This childhood longing clearly carries over into Butch, who is willing to risk everything for a symbolic connection to a father figure.
It's my fault. Much.
This motif appears again and again in Tarantino's work. In Reservoir Dogs, Mr. Orange sees Mr. White as a kind of parental figure. In Django Unchained, King Schultz treats Django almost like a son. And that's not even mentioning the complicated, deeply emotional relationship between Bill, Beatrix Kiddo, and their daughter. Childhood emotions follow creators into their films and can shape even the smallest details, sometimes even casting choices. As a teenager, Quentin Tarantino adored John Travolta and was genuinely upset by the actor's career decline in the late 1980s. Suddenly, Travolta stopped getting major roles and became stuck in the Look Who's Talking franchise. Movies about talking babies and pets. Hardly worthy of his true potential. Tarantino considers Travolta's performance in Brian De Palma's Blowout to be absolutely brilliant. Possibly one of the greatest acting performances in film history. And once Tarantino had the power to dictate terms to studios, he simply couldn't pass up the chance to revive the career of an actor he loved as a kid. What's especially amusing is that Travolta hadn't really played criminals or villains before, aside from the sleazy Billy Nolan and Carrie. But the role of Vincent Vega would completely relaunch his career. From that point on, Travolta would largely specialize in criminals, villains, or at least morally questionable characters. Just a year after Pulp Fiction, Get Shorty came out, with Travolta playing a gangster. Then came his turn as the traitor in John Woo's Broken Arrow, and most importantly, Face Off, a full-blown villain showcase.
Wait, you good looking.
Another influence rooted in Tarantino's childhood film experience is his fascination with violence. Oh yes, only the lazy critics haven't accused Tarantino of excessive brutality. The scene in Reservoir Dogs, where Michael Madsen dances in front of a wounded cop, enraged many viewers. Why show it so openly? Though in reality, the violence is staged rather modestly, and Reservoir Dogs isn't much more brutal than something like Gladiator. But that's a discussion for an entirely different video, one dedicated to Tarantino's debut film. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Pulp Fiction continues this trend, almost deliberately provoking the public. It's no coincidence that Tarantino said in his Cannes acceptance speech that his films don't unite people, they divide them, encouraging debate. This emphasis on violence once again traces back to the early 1970s cinema and has nothing to do with endorsing moral decay. Violence is simply one of the most effective tools for provoking emotion in an audience. And portraying brutality on screen doesn't suggest its acceptability in real life. On the contrary, these violent outbursts often emphasize the absurdity and meaninglessness of the act itself. Returning to cinema speculation, Tarantino speaks with great enthusiasm about John Boorman's Deliverance. He saw it as a child and was deeply shocked by what unfolded on screen. Interestingly, he didn't particularly like the entire film, but the middle section left a lasting impression. The characters go on a trip, talk, reveal themselves, and then sadists brutally humiliate one of them. Exactly what happens to Marcellus Wallace in Pulp Fiction. After that, the film becomes less engaging again, but that shocking midpoint burned itself into young Tarantino's memory. So he recreated a similar moment in Pulp Fiction. When you're watching the conflict between Bruce Willis's Butch and Ving Rhames' Marcellus, you would never expect that moments later they'll both be captured by sadists. Hunters suddenly become victims. This abrupt, senseless violence creates empathy for the characters far more effectively than any dialogue. Or the beloved tragic backstory so many screenwriters rely on. Quentin Tarantino has explained his approach to violence very clearly in one of his most famous interviews.
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because it's so much fun, Chan. Get it?
Violence is a cinematic tool that affects the viewer emotionally. It's not an antisocial manifesto. Criticisms of such techniques often border on hypocrisy. If we define violence strictly as the application of physical force by one person against another, then the most innocent films would be Titanic, with hundreds of deaths caused by a disaster, and therefore supposedly acceptable. Or Final Destination, where characters are gruesomely killed by accidents rather than direct human action. In Pulp Fiction, Jules executes people without hesitation after casually eating a burger. Even the seemingly decent Butch beats an opponent to death in the ring and shows no remorse.
Now that I know he's dead, you wanna know how I feel about it? I don't feel the least bit bad about it.
And yet, all of this leads to a less obvious but crucial characteristic of Quentin Tarantino's work: a deep, persistent longing for justice. How is that possible, you might ask? Even though the director constantly tells stories about characters who are far from morally pleasant, the plots of his films almost always lead to the triumph of justice, even if that justice comes through violence. The ruthless killer Bill meets his death, and a mother is reunited with her daughter. Stuntman Mike is defeated by his victims, and Ordell Robbie and Jackie Brown does not go unpunished and is killed by the police.
Ray's got a gun!
Later, Tarantino's pursuit of justice reaches its absolute peak, and he begins rewriting history itself. Hitler dies in 1944, trapped by a Jewish woman on a run. The Manson family decides to postpone their visit to Sharon Tate's house, and is slaughtered by a group of ordinary actors. And Django takes revenge on brutal slave traders for all their crimes. Pulp Fiction, despite its extreme violence, is also a film about redemption and justice. Butch and Wallace unite in the face of a greater threat and strike a peace deal. The boxer could have escaped, but instead he risks his life to save his enemy from an even greater evil.
Zed's dead, baby. Zed's dead.
That single decision earns him a full happy ending. Jules rethinks his life and refuses to kill the robbers. He walks away from crime and survives. Vincent, on the other hand, fails to understand the divine warning and is punished by Butch's hand. Despite the violence, the profanity, and racial slurs in nearly every other sentence, Pulp Fiction is a deeply moral film, one that clearly reflects Tarantino's obsession with justice. And here lies yet another trick. He isn't just making cool gangster movies with razor-sharp dialogue. He's embedding a powerful subtext beneath the surface. Tarantino himself completely denies this in interviews, insisting that the film is about something else entirely. Cool characters, snappy dialogue, and a cozy atmosphere straight out of 1970s exploitation cinema. But the very fact that Pulp Fiction, despite its non-linear structure, ends on Jules' act of mercy means everything. This is the film's true climax, its real resolution. For a classic action movie, Butch riding off into the sunset on a chopper would have been the perfect ending. And in purely chronological terms, that is the film's ending. But Tarantino chose Jules' redemption instead.
As I felt the touch of God, God got involved.
We've dealt with Tarantino's subtext, but there's still another crucial aspect of his filmmaking that sits right on the surface: his obsession with the perfect image. Cinema shouldn't just be enjoyed with your ears, through hilarious dialogue and carefully curated music, or with your heart, by absorbing themes of redemption. It must also be experienced with your eyes, by admiring the visual composition of every single frame. For Pulp Fiction, Tarantino shot on 35mm film, which delivers razor-sharp images and rich, saturated colors, but also requires intense artificial lighting due to its low light sensitivity. Harder to execute, but far more impressive in the final result. To add realism and atmosphere to Vincent and Jules' introduction, cinematographer Andrzej Sekula used Steadicam shots to create smooth camera movement and the sensation of walking alongside the characters. These long takes reinforce that signature hangout movie vibe. This is especially noticeable during Vincent and Mia's visit to Jackrabbit Slim's. The viewer feels like they've actually walked into the restaurant to relax, look around, and absorb the decor alongside the characters. But when Pulp Fiction abandons its hangout rhythm and shifts into action, Tarantino relies on precise alternation between medium and close-up shots, carefully highlighting emotional beats and story-critical details. Let's recall one of the most touching, and at the same time hysterically funny, scenes in the film. Christopher Walken's monologue about the gold watch. The speech is divided into 3 segments, each tied to a different historical conflict. When Captain Coons moves from World War I to World War II, the camera angle shifts, and Walken's delivery changes. The audience becomes fully invested, expecting a tragic payoff. And it arrives, but in an entirely comedic way.
In one place he knew he could hide something, his ass.
In the final section of the monologue, set during the Vietnam War, Walken's tone becomes almost cheerful. The camera positions itself directly in front of him, savoring every facial expression. And the audience can hardly believe that this is where the story was headed. According to Tarantino, he loves misleading the viewer, switching between humor, tragedy, and sudden burst of violence. Because the happiest viewer is a surprised viewer, one hit by an unexpected emotional wave. If the audience knows exactly what's coming next, they get bored. Tarantino never allows that to happen. That's why Vincent and Mia's budding romance ends with an adrenaline shot straight into the heart. And that's also why Tarantino loves scrambling the timelines of his films and telling stories out of chronological order. Just imagine Pulp Fiction told in chronological order. Jules and Vincent kill their targets, clean the car, and run into Pumpkin and Honey Bunny. Then Vincent dances with Mia and gets killed by Butch, who rides off into the sunset on a chopper. It feels bland. Only by knowing Travolta's character's fate and his experience with Uma Thurman's character can we fully understand his decision to keep working for Marcellus after the Bonnie situation. By seeing what a criminal life does to the people around him, we can truly appreciate Jules' choice and his desire for a peaceful life. My favorite trick once again involves Vincent, his resurrection, after we've just witnessed his death. At first, there's a faint hope that Travolta's character somehow survived. But then the viewer realizes that this is the past, nothing more than a memory of a character who is already gone. A character you've grown attached to. You start watching him more closely, feeling his personality more deeply, and judging him for choosing to stay in this bloody business. And when Pulp Fiction ends, you immediately want to watch it again. Relive those moments. See what happens after Vincent and Jules walk out of the diner, even though you perfectly understand where that road leads. That's exactly what a great prequel should do. Create an unbearable urge to press play on what comes next, even if you've already seen it. Another illusion by the director, another trick that fools the audience, and yet it works beautifully. Every trait of Quentin Tarantino's authorial style that I've described appears in all of his films, except Reservoir Dogs. But again, that's a topic for another video on my channel. Still, it's Pulp Fiction where these traits are easiest to see. This is the work of a true master of illusion, someone who hides a pursuit of goodness and justice behind a simple gangster story, who conceals unexpected twists and fresh emotions behind scrambled timelines and worn-out setups, who disguises genuine humanism beneath old-school ultra-violence. That's why the word fiction is in the title. It doesn't emphasize the plot. We already know it's fictional. It emphasizes the form itself. Everything we see is an illusion, a game played with us by a director of undeniable talent. Now click on the card to jump to the next video and check out the playlist packed with deep dives into iconic franchises. There's a lot of great stuff. Thanks for watching. This is ElevenSlate.